When you're standing at the edge of a big purchase, especially a laptop that's supposed to double as a portable studio, you start weighing a lot of what-ifs. Will it keep up when you open a hefty CAD file? Can you edit 4K video on a train without the system hiccuping? And most of all, will you get enough bang for the buck, or end up with a machine that feels great on paper but falls short in the real world? That's the lens I'm looking through today, and I'm hoping to give you enough context to decide if the HP ZBook Studio G10 is the right fit for your workflow. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the ZBook Studio G10 is positioned as a mobile workstation, not a gaming laptop or a cheap everyday notebook. That means HP is targeting people who need serious compute power on the go, engineers running simulations, architects drafting in Revit, video editors stitching together timelines, or 3D artists polishing renders. If you fall into any of those categories, you already know that raw CPU cores and a dedicated GPU matter more than just a pretty design. The G10 packs a 13th Gen Intel Core i7-13800H, a 14-core beast that can sustain 2.5 GHz base clocks and turbo higher when the workload spikes. In practice, that translates to smooth multitasking when you have Photoshop, Premiere Pro, and a web browser all open at the same time. I ran a quick test on a typical 30-minute 4K edit, and the timeline never stuttered. The rendering preview kept up, thanks to those extra cores. The discrete graphics card is an NVIDIA RTX 1000 with 6 GB of VRAM. It's not the top-tier RTX 3080 you'd find in a gaming rig, but for most professional workloads it hits the sweet spot. When you're modeling in SolidWorks or lighting a scene in Blender, the A1000's CUDA cores accelerate viewport performance and reduce render times by roughly 30% compared to relying on integrated graphics. That's a real-world win because it lets you iterate faster without having to wait for a nightly batch render. Now, the display. HP went with a 16-inch WUXGA panel at 1920x1200. That extra vertical pixel line compared to a standard 1080p screen gives you a little more real estate for timelines, tool palettes, and code windows. The color accuracy is factory calibrated, which matters if you're doing color-critical work like photo retouching. In daylight, the panel stays readable. There's enough brightness to keep the screen usable on a CAF table, though it won't win any outdoor-only battles. If you need a 4K panel for the highest level of detail, you'll have to look elsewhere, but for most professionals the WUXGA balance of crispness and battery draw feels right. Speaking of battery, that's one area where the G10 shows a trade-off. The high-performance CPU and GPU together draw more power than you'd see on a typical Ultrabook. In my day-to-day test editing a 10-minute video clip while the Wi-Fi stayed active, the battery lasted about 5 hours before I needed to plug in. If you plan to work from a coffee shop with limited outlets, that might be a pinch point. However, the laptop does support fast charging, so a quick 30-minute top-up can get you through the rest of the afternoon. Storage is a 512 GB NVMe SSD. That's speedy enough to launch apps in seconds and move large files around without the dreaded loading wheel. For many freelancers, 512 GB is sufficient for project files, media assets, and a few software suites. But if you're routinely handling terabytes of raw footage or massive simulation datasets, you'll need external storage or an upgrade. The good news is the drive is user replaceable, so you can swap in a larger SSD down the line without opening a warranty claim. Memory sits at 16 GB of DDR5 RAM. For most professional tasks running a 3D viewport, compiling code, or editing video, 16 GB feels comfortable. I pushed the machine with a 12-track audio session, multiple After Effects compositions, and a couple of background VMs, and it held up. The downside is the RAM isn't soldered, but it's also not a hot swap. If you anticipate needing 32 GB for future-proofing, you'll have to open the chassis or opt for a configuration that already includes it. That's a cost consideration you should factor in early. Now, who should buy this? If you're a freelance designer who needs to travel between client sites, a field engineer who must run analysis software on-site, or a small studio looking for a single device that can double as a presentation tool and a render node, the ZBook Studio G10 makes sense. Its blend of a strong CPU, a workstation-grade GPU, and a color-accurate screen gives you the core tools you need without stepping up to a desktop workstation that locks you to a desk. It also fits into the HP ecosystem nicely if you already use HP monitors, docks, or printers. The Thunderbolt 4 ports and HP SureView privacy screen options integrate smoothly. On the flip side, if your primary use case is casual web browsing, streaming movies, or light office work, you're overpaying for the extra horsepower. The laptop's weight just under 2 kg is decent for